We don't have a microphone, so I'm going to enjoy the moment. I've never had 3 minutes before to address our friends here, so I'm going to use it. Everyone's familiar with the fact that we just went through Easter week, which for believers is a very holy time. Did you happen to see the cover of Time magazine or the cover of Newsweek? Time magazine had a picture of Jesus Christ in a leather jacket standing in Times Square. The article said, "Forget the church, follow Jesus." That text on its own is interesting. You can have a conversation about that. The article was written by Andrew Sullivan, who is a gay writer who was formerly with the Atlantic magazine, writing for Time magazine. Think about that. This was the cover, that was the cover of Newsweek. The cover of Time magazine had an article on rethinking heaven. Again, this is the most holy week for believers, and both of America's mainstream news publications, in essence, were in full frontal assault for believers. I just want you to consider that. Why? Because how we get our information and from where has so much to do with the solutions that we want to be able to offer, and frankly, what we even believe the problems to be. So let me give you another example. How many of you think you're affected by Social Security? Raise your hand. Really ought to be all of you, even the young ones here. You're paying into it. The older ones are going to be hoping to receive it. And right now there's about 60 million Americans that are on the receiving end of Social Security and over 100 million that are paying into it. Yesterday, the Social Security Administration and its trustees, who are Obama appointees, announced that Social Security is even deeper in the red than we thought. And I'm not talking about some clerk. This was Tim Geithner and Catherine Sebelius. Why does that matter? Because there was an admission by people in this administration that Social Security is in more trouble than we suspected. You know folks that are on Social Security disability, that's going bankrupt in 2016. Let that ring for a second. Now let this ring for a second. Here are 3 regional newspapers. I've got the Wall Street Journal, I've got the New York Times, and I've got the Wilmington Star News, which until recently was owned by the New York Times. These are daily newspapers. This conservative newspaper points out, and you'll notice the cover, stress rises on Social Security. The report says program will exhaust reserves 3 years earlier than expected. This is the cover of the Wall Street Journal. The New York Times has their Social Security story buried on page 13. Interesting. The Star News has no Social Security story. Why does this matter? Because the #1 issue that is going to be defining this presidential election is our budget, how we manage our resources, how we handle Social Security and Medicare. The left wants to pretend that there is no problem. You need to do the homework and know that there's a problem. Tonight we'll be talking about problems. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brown,
First, let me thank each of you for coming out tonight. Let me thank the Bladen County Republican Party for having to organize this and putting it together. These forums are important because it's important for you to get to know each of us and get to know each of us as best you can. You know, I think back to when I was growing up and working on the farm in Summers in Johnston County. My uncle at the age of 10, he gave me 8 rows of the Bible. He said, "Son, these are your 8 rows to do with as you wish. Whatever you make with them is what you make." I remember the first year the labor started to come through the field, and I went out there and I stopped them at my 8 rows because I didn't want to have to pay them. You know, you learn something about hard work. You learn something about the value of money. I taught and suckered those 8 rows myself. And you know, I remember thinking then, although I was not politically inclined, I remember thinking then that the sky was the limit. You know, I was growing up in America. There was ample opportunity. Ronald Reagan was president. And though I didn't know much about politics other than Republican and Democrat, I knew we had a real commander-in-chief. I knew that our country was in good hands. And I knew that every individual, including myself, had plenty of opportunity to succeed if we just put our minds to it and work hard to do so. I went on and I paid my way through school at NC State with my tobacco money from all those summers. Earned degrees in ag business management, ag econ, and chemistry. It was senior year of my schooling at NC State. I was over in a program in Prague, the Czech Republic. There were 60 of us. 10 of us from America, 50 from the former Communist Bloc. My roommate was from Romania, and it struck me that they knew more about America and its history and its purpose and its founding, and a whole lot more about the free enterprise system than we did. It also struck me that this country was put here for a reason. Just so happened I was graduating from NC State in December of '94. Republicans took control of the House and the Senate that November of '94. So I figured in my great wisdom, with all those folks leaving and all those folks coming in, there'd be an opportunity. I had no money, no job, so I figured I had nothing to lose. I went to DC and started knocking on doors. If I knocked on one, I knocked on 1,000. A fellow by the name of Jesse Helms offered me a job. That's how I got started. Fast forward, I served 2 stints for Senator Helms, and then I'm down in my second term in the state Senate. We have been very, very effective in the state Senate addressing the problems that this state has. I'm proud to have been a leader on the regulatory reform effort that's helping all the businesses. Proud to have been a leader in terms of helping to cut taxes, cut spending, and balance the budget. Those are the things that we've got to do in Washington. I have the experience to do them, and when I get there, I'll be able to hit the ground running. It won't take 1 or 2 terms to figure out what to do. Look forward to answering the questions. Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you. We're going to go into the prepared questions now, and the timekeeper, you cannot notice, is right here in the front row, and so she'll keep us honest going forward with this. So the first question, Mr. Quintana, is yours. You get 2 minutes, and then Mr. Rouser, you get a minute, and Crow will get a minute, and then Mr. Quintana, you have a minute to kind of wrap this up. So the first question is about the economy. I think polling across your district, certainly polling across North Carolina, has shown us what people are really concerned about is the economy. What really drives the economy is small business. They are the real job creators in this country and in this state. So in your view, what are the biggest challenges facing small businesses in America, and how should those be addressed?
Well, thank you for the question. I have some experience as a big business person with one of the world's leading investment banks, where I worked in commodities like oil, natural gas, crude oil, gasoline, and electricity. So I understand how global markets work. But then I left that world and I started a small business. And I consulted with big clients like Sony and AT&T and Mattel, but we were a small shop. I had to sell a 68 Chevelle to buy conference room furniture. That's sacrifice, you know? I've signed the front of a paycheck. I understand big and small markets. The job market is very troubling today. We have over 11% unemployment rate in southeastern North Carolina. As somebody who has been in the big and the small business world, there are a number of things that we need to address. The first is the regulatory environment. That means repealing Obamacare, repealing Dodd-Frank, which has made it hard for banks to borrow and then in turn to lend to small businesses, whether it's somebody looking to build out their construction business or a store looking to expand. We need to repeal Sarbanes-Oxley. That's some legislation that was put together in 2002 that has limited the number of initial public offerings when you want to take your company from a small business to a big business and use publicly raised money to do it. Some folks say we've lost 10 million jobs because of Sarbanes-Oxley. I want to make sure that we have a tax climate that is not chasing businesses overseas. Do you know that we're #1 in the world right now for corporate tax? Even the Japanese have figured out that they need to reduce their rates. I am personally a supporter of the fair tax, but I am a believer in the Republican budget plan that lowers the corporate tax rate and then also sets individual income tax rates at 10 and 25%. I'd like to see the end of death tax. I'd like to see the end of capital gains taxes because that limits private investment, which would create jobs. Those are just a couple of the things I'd like to see.